You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Those words from Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic philosopher and Roman emperor, hold a truth we often forget. True influence doesn't come from controlling the world around us, but from mastering how we respond to it. Think about that for a moment. How often do we chase after external validation, scramble to manipulate circumstances, or stress over things we can't change, only to feel powerless in the end? Stoicism flips that script. It teaches us that real authority, the kind that commands respect and shapes outcomes, starts within. And here's the surprising part. This ancient philosophy isn't just for scholars or historians. It's a practical toolkit for anyone who wants to lead better, connect deeper, and navigate life's challenges with unshakable poise, whether you're negotiating a business deal, navigating a difficult conversation, or simply trying to stay grounded in chaotic times. Imagine walking into any room, whether it's a boardroom, a social gathering, or even a tense family dinner, with a quiet confidence that comes from knowing nothing can throw you off balance. That's the promise of Stoic practice. For centuries, leaders, thinkers, and doers have relied on these principles not just to survive, but to thrive. From Marcus Aurelius ruling an empire to modern CEOs steering billion-dollar companies, the Stoic approach to influence isn't about dominance or manipulation. It's about clarity, discipline, and the kind of inner strength that naturally draws others to your vision. And today, we're diving into 34 actionable practices that can help you cultivate that same power. These aren't abstract theories, they're time-tested strategies for building credibility, earning trust, and making an impact, all by focusing on what you can control. So why does this matter now? Because influence isn't just about titles or authority. It's about the subtle ways we shape our relationships, our careers, and even our own happiness. Maybe you've felt overlooked in meetings, struggled to set boundaries, or watched others sway opinions effortlessly while you wonder what they're doing differently. The answer lies in the Stoic distinction between what's in our hands and what isn't. When you stop wasting energy on the uncontrollable and start sharpening your mindset, decisions, and actions, something shifts. People notice, opportunities open, and suddenly you're not just reacting to life, you're directing it. Over the next few minutes, we'll explore how to apply these principles in everyday situations, from handling criticism to inspiring teams, all through the lens of Stoic wisdom. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about uncovering the most grounded, influential version of yourself, the one who leads not with force, but with unshakable presence. Ready to begin? The first Stoic practice begins not with action, but with perception, because how we see the world shapes how we navigate it. Picture this: two people face the same setback, say a missed promotion at work. One spirals into self-doubt, convinced they've been treated unfairly. The other sees it as a chance to refine their skills, to prove their resilience. Same event, wildly different outcomes. That's the power of the discipline of perception. The Stoics weren't naive optimists. They were realists who understood that life will throw obstacles in our path. But here's their radical insight: the obstacle itself isn't the problem. It's our judgment of it that determines whether it crushes us or strengthens us. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of Stoicism's greatest teachers, put it bluntly: it's not things that upset us, but our opinions about them. Let's make this practical. Imagine you've just received harsh feedback on a project. Your stomach drops. The immediate reaction might be defensiveness or shame, natural but not helpful. Now apply the Stoic reframe. What if this criticism isn't an attack, but a free masterclass in improvement? What if the person giving it, even if their delivery was clumsy, just handed you a roadmap to leveling up? That shift in perception transforms agitation into action. History's most influential figures mastered this mental pivot. When Thomas Edison's lab burned down, destroying years of work, he didn't collapse in despair. He famously said, "There's value in disaster. All our mistakes are burned up. Now we can start fresh." That's Stoic perception in action, seeing the spark of opportunity in the ashes of setback. Now bring this home. Think of a recent challenge you faced, maybe a rejected proposal, a strained relationship, or even a personal goal that feels out of reach. How have you been interpreting it? As a roadblock or as raw material for growth? The key isn't to pretend difficulties don't hurt, but to ask, what can this teach me? Where's the hidden leverage here? When you start hunting for the upside in obstacles, something remarkable happens. You stop feeling like a victim of circumstances and start becoming their architect. That's the foundation of true influence, because people who can't be shaken by adversity, who meet chaos with calm and problems with creativity, are the ones others naturally look to for leadership. They're not immune to life's blows, they've just mastered the art of turning those blows into stepping stones. Now let's talk about a Stoic practice that sounds counterintuitive at first, but holds extraordinary power: Premeditatio Malorum, or the premeditation of evils. This isn't about pessimism or dwelling on fear. It's about mentally rehearsing adversity before it happens, so when life inevitably throws a curveball, you're not caught off guard. Seneca put it best: the person who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. Think of it like a fire drill. No one hopes for a fire, but practicing the escape route means you won't freeze in panic if the alarm sounds. Here's where modern habits get it backwards. We're taught to avoid discomfort, to push away negative thoughts, to hope for the best without preparing for the worst. But Stoics knew better. They understood that rehearsing challenges in advance strips them of their emotional sting. Take a CEO navigating an unpredictable market. Instead of clinging to optimism alone, she runs mental simulations. What if our biggest client leaves? What if supply chains collapse? By facing these scenarios in her mind, she's already crafted responses, turning potential disasters into manageable problems. That's Premeditatio Malorum in action, not as anxiety fuel, but as strategic preparation. Consider how this applies to everyday life. Maybe you've got a tough conversation looming, a negotiation, a confrontation, even a high-stakes presentation. Most people procrastinate or distract themselves, hoping it'll go smoothly. But what if you did the opposite? Spend 5 minutes visualizing the worst-case scenario. The client says no, your voice shakes, the room goes silent. Now ask, how would I handle that? What's my next move? Suddenly, the fear loses its grip. You've already lived through it in your mind, so the real thing feels familiar, not frightening. This practice isn't about expecting failure, it's about removing its power to derail you. Ancient generals used it before battle. Athletes use it before big games. You can use it before anything that makes your pulse race. So here's a challenge. What's one future challenge you can mentally rehearse this week? A difficult feedback session, a financial hurdle. Play it out in detail, not to dwell on the negative, but to build the unshakable confidence that comes from knowing you're prepared. Because when you've already weathered the storm in your mind, the real rain feels like just another step forward. Amor Fati, Latin for love of fate, might be one of the most transformative Stoic practices you'll ever adopt. It's not about passive resignation or gritting your teeth through hardship. It's about embracing every twist, every setback, even every failure as if you'd chosen it yourself. Nietzsche, who drew heavily from Stoicism, called it my formula for greatness in a human being. Think about that for a moment. Greatness isn't just overcoming obstacles, it's loving them for the strength they forge in you. Marcus Aurelius lived this daily. Leading Rome through wars, plagues, and betrayals, he wrote in his private journal, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's Amor Fati in motion, not just enduring adversity, but seeing it as the very thing that sharpens your edge. Consider the modern startup world, where failure is often the price of innovation. Airbnb's founders sold cereal boxes to stay afloat during their early struggles. Steve Jobs was fired from Apple, the company he created, only to return years later with a vision that revolutionized technology. What separated them from those who gave up? They didn't just survive their low points, they leaned into them, extracting lessons and momentum from what others saw as dead ends. The Stoic mindset flips the script. Your worst-case scenario isn't a detour, it's part of the route. Now apply this to your life. That project that fell apart, the rejection that stung, the unexpected change that derailed your plans. What if you didn't just accept it, but actively appreciated it? Not in a Pollyanna-ish way, but with the clarity that every challenge is a tailor-made gym for your resilience. Ask yourself, how is this struggle preparing me for something I can't yet see? Where is it forcing me to grow in ways comfort never could? Amor Fati isn't mystical, it's intensely practical. When you stop resisting reality and start collaborating with it, you unlock a quiet power that outlasts every temporary setback. Because the people who thrive aren't the ones with the easiest paths, they're the ones who learn to love the climb. Some things are up to you, most aren't. That blunt truth from Epictetus's handbook cuts through centuries of human stress like a scalpel. The Stoics called it the dichotomy of control, not just a philosophical idea, but a daily practice for untangling yourself from needless frustration. Picture this: you're stuck in traffic, late for an important meeting. Your hands clench the wheel, your pulse races. But here's the Stoic question: is honking your horn or cursing the delay actually moving the cars ahead? Or are you just burning energy on something entirely outside your command? That's the pivot point. Modern life bombards us with stressors we mistake for solvable problems. The coworker who undermines us, the weather that ruins plans, even the random comment from a stranger that lingers in our minds for days. We treat these like puzzles we can solve, when in reality, they're storms we're trying to stop with our bare hands. Epictetus, who began life as a slave, understood powerlessness intimately. His famous handbook opens with this radical clarity: some things are within our power while others are not as resignation, but as liberation. Because when you stop pouring energy into the uncontrollable, you free up reserves for what you can shape: your effort, your attitude, your next move. Take two salespeople facing a slump. One obsesses over the economy, the competition, the unfair market. The other audits their outreach strategy, refines their pitch, and doubles down on relationships. Guess who outsells the other long term? The difference isn't luck, it's focus. Try this today. Grab a notebook and draw two columns. Label one, within my control, the other, beyond my control. Now list your current stressors. That critical client, their decision goes in column 2. Your preparation for the meeting, column 1. A family member's health. Mostly column 2. Your choice to call them with support, firmly column 1. This isn't just an exercise, it's a revelation. Most of our anguish comes from muddying these categories, from demanding the universe bend while neglecting the ground beneath our own feet. The Stoics weren't suggesting we ignore external challenges. They were teaching us to invest our energy where it actually grows. Because here's the secret: influence isn't about controlling the world. It's about mastering your corner of it so thoroughly that the world can't help but take notice. Picture a Roman general at the height of his power, standing victorious in a triumphal parade. Behind him, a slave whispers in his ear, "Memento Mori, remember you must die," not to frighten him, but to free him. This jarring Stoic practice cuts through life's noise like nothing else. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire, kept a skull on his desk as a visceral reminder. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Far from morbid, this is the ultimate clarifier. When death sits at the table, trivialities vanish. The meeting that felt urgent, the grudge you've nursed, the dream you've postponed, suddenly their true weight becomes undeniable. Modern psychology backs this ancient wisdom. Studies on death awareness show that confronting mortality, not in fear, but in focus, sharpens priorities dramatically. People who regularly reflect on life's finiteness waste less time, invest more in meaningful relationships, and pursue goals aligned with their deepest values. Think of Steve Jobs' famous Stanford speech after his cancer diagnosis. "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life." That's Memento Mori in action, not as despair, but as the ultimate productivity hack. So here's the challenge. What if you carried your own version of that Roman slave's whisper? Not with a skull on your desk, but with a simple morning question. If today were my last, would I spend it this way? Watch how quickly that reshapes your day. The petty argument loses its appeal. The someday project demands attention now. Even mundane moments gain weight, a child's laughter, a shared meal, the work that truly matters. The Stoics weren't fixated on death, they were obsessed with life, because when you stop pretending time is infinite, you start spending it like the currency it is. Not on distractions, but on what echoes beyond your last breath. This practice reveals a paradox. Embracing life's end isn't about endings at all. It's about beginnings, the courage to start that venture, mend that relationship, or finally live by your own standards. Mortality's mirror doesn't show limits, it shows possibilities. So ask yourself, what's one thing you'd do differently today if you fully grasped its fleeting nature? That answer isn't morbid, it's your compass. Imagine waking up tomorrow and deliberately choosing the harder option, skipping breakfast, turning off the heat in winter, walking past your phone first thing in the morning. Sounds unnecessary, even punishing, right? That's exactly why the Stoics did it. Voluntary discomfort was their secret weapon against life's inevitable hardships. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, regularly slept on the floor and ate meager meals. Cato the Younger, the Stoic senator, wore threadbare robes in public to remind himself that dignity wasn't tied to comfort. These weren't acts of self-denial for its own sake. They were training exercises for resilience. Like an athlete preparing for a marathon by running uphill, the Stoics conditioned their minds by embracing discomfort before it could be forced upon them. Take cold showers, a modern example anyone can try. That first icy blast triggers the same primal resistance as facing a difficult conversation or an unexpected setback. But here's the twist. When you choose to stay under the cold water, you're not just building tolerance to discomfort, you're rewiring your brain's relationship with adversity. Neuroscientists call this stress inoculation. By voluntarily exposing yourself to manageable stress, whether it's skipping a meal for a short fast, leaving your phone behind for a digital detox, or taking the stairs instead of the elevator, you teach your nervous system a crucial lesson. Discomfort isn't an emergency. It's just data. History's most resilient figures understood this. Teddy Roosevelt, who suffered severe asthma as a child, trained his body through brutal outdoor regimens, later crediting his stamina to those early challenges. Elon Musk famously lived on $1 a day during his first startup to prove he could endure scarcity. The pattern is clear. Voluntary hardship isn't about suffering, it's about sovereignty. When you routinely step outside your comfort zone, the unpredictable blows of life lose their power to destabilize you. So here's today's challenge. Pick one voluntary discomfort. Skip the snooze button and rise early. Walk in the rain without complaining. Take a social media sabbatical for 24 hours. Notice what happens when you stop avoiding minor aches and start leaning into them. That flutter of resistance you feel, that's the sound of your comfort zone expanding. And with each small act of chosen difficulty, you're stocking an inner arsenal of grit that'll outlast any external storm. Because here's the ultimate Stoic truth: the person who can willingly embrace discomfort will never truly be at its mercy. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his private thoughts for likes or shares, he wrote them to wrestle with himself. That leather-bound notebook he carried, later known as Meditations, wasn't filled with polished aphorisms or performative wisdom. It was raw self-dialogue, a battlefield where a Roman emperor confronted his own flaws, fears, and fleeting emotions. Today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness. He wrote one morning, not as a complaint but as a mental rehearsal. This is Stoic journaling at its core, not a diary of events but a mirror held up to the soul. Compare that to our modern habit of scrolling through curated highlight reels or crafting posts designed for applause. The Stoics didn't journal to be seen, they wrote to see themselves clearly. Think of your journal as a courtroom where you're both the witness and the judge. Instead of listing what happened today, interrogate your reactions. When your coworker took credit for your idea, did you fume silently or assert yourself with calm clarity? When traffic made you late, did you blame the world or acknowledge your choice to leave unprepared? Marcus modeled this brutally honest self-audit. On one page, he chastises himself for sleeping in. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being, not as an emperor. Not as a victim, just a person doing their part. That shift from externalizing blame to internalizing agency is where journaling becomes alchemy. Here's how to practice it tonight. Set aside 5 minutes and answer 3 Stoic prompts. First, what did I truly control today? Not the weather, not your boss's mood, just your effort, attention, and choices. Next, where did I confuse preferences for necessities? Maybe you treated Wi-Fi as oxygen or mistook someone's approval for survival. Finally, what's one thing I'd do differently if I knew this were my last week? Not to induce panic, but to expose misplaced priorities. These questions aren't about guilt, they're about clarity. The magic of this practice lies in its repetition. Over time, patterns emerge. You'll notice how often you've sweated the uncontrollable or how quickly small irritations hijack your peace. But you'll also spot quiet victories the moment you paused instead of reacting, the time you chose integrity over convenience. That's the Stoic Journal's gift. It turns daily life into a training ground where every interaction, no matter how small, becomes a chance to refine your character. No audience required. Stand on a mountaintop at dawn, watching the world stretch endlessly below. Cities reduced to specks, rivers like silver threads, human lives invisible at this scale. That's the essence of the Stoic view from above. A mental exercise that snaps trivial worries into perspective by forcing us to see our place in the vastness. Seneca captured it perfectly. The universe is a single country, and all of us are fellow citizens. Think about the last time you lost sleep over a snide comment in a meeting or a passive-aggressive email. Now imagine watching that moment from space. The office building would vanish, the words would dissolve, all that would remain is a pale blue dot spinning silently in the dark. That's the power of this practice. It doesn't erase problems, but it reveals their true size. Consider the petty feud brewing in your workplace right now, the one where two colleagues are locked in a battle over credit for a project. Up close, it feels like a war, but pull back the lens. In 5 years, will anyone remember who drafted the slides? In 50 years, will either of them still be alive to care? This isn't about dismissing real concerns. It's about distinguishing pebbles from boulders. Marcus Aurelius used this technique daily, reminding himself that even the Roman Empire was just a small part of the whole before returning to rule with calm focus. Here's how to make it practical. Next time stress tightens your chest, maybe your boss nitpicked your presentation, or a client ghosted you, pause, close your eyes. Picture the room you're in from a drone's view, then higher until your street becomes a grid, your city a smudge, your continent a shape. Keep going until Earth is a marble hanging in the void. Now ask, does this crisis survive the zoom? Often you'll find the sting has dulled. What remains is either genuinely significant, an ethical breach, a relationship fracture, or exposed as noise you can release. Astronauts call this the overview effect, a profound shift in awareness reported by nearly everyone who sees Earth from orbit. Their petty quarrels dissolve. Borders seem absurd. What emerges is clarity about what actually matters. You don't need a spaceship to access it, just the willingness to step outside your own mental gravity. Because when you regularly practice this cosmic zoom out, something unexpected happens. You stop wasting energy on battles that shrink in the grand scheme. And that's when real influence begins, not by controlling every minor drama, but by conserving your strength for the few things worthy of your full presence. A heated argument erupts at work over a missed deadline, voices rise, fingers point, emotions flood the room like a storm surge. Now imagine pressing pause and asking one simple question: what's actually true here? That's the heart of objective judgment, the 9th Stoic practice. Marcus Aurelius described it as stripping away the bark of impressions to reach the bare wood of reality. Not what we fear, not what we assume, not the stories we spin, just the unvarnished facts. He wrote in Meditations, don't let the force of an impression when it first hits you knock you off your feet. Say to it, hold on a moment, let me see who you are and what you represent. That pause, that deliberate separation of event from interpretation, is where true clarity begins. Take a modern example. Your partner forgets an anniversary. The emotional bark might whisper they don't care anymore or I'm being taken for granted, but strip that away. The fact a date was missed, possible reasons, a chaotic work week, a calendar oversight, or yes, perhaps deeper neglect. But jumping straight to the darkest conclusion without evidence is like adding fuel to a fire you can't yet see. The Stoics called this prosouch attention to your initial impressions before they harden into judgments. It's not about suppressing emotion, it's about interrogating it. Here's how to apply this today. Next time you feel your pulse quicken over a text left unanswered or a coworker's curt email, grab a sheet of paper, draw 2 columns. In the first, list only observable facts. Message sent at 9 a.m., no reply by 5 p.m. In the second, note your interpretations. They're ignoring me or they're angry. Now cross-examine that second column like a lawyer. What evidence proves this? What alternative explanations exist? You'll often find the bark of assumption peels away, leaving simpler, saner truths beneath. This practice isn't just for conflicts, it reshapes how you see opportunities too. That project you've avoided because it's too complex or I'll fail, strip the bark. The reality, a set of tasks, some skills to build, a chance to learn. No more, no less. So here's your challenge. What's one situation you're overcomplicating right now with layered assumptions? A strained friendship, a career pivot, a creative block. Write it down naked of judgment, just the bones of what is. Because when you stop confusing facts with fears, you gain the rarest kind of power, the ability to respond to the world as it actually is, not as your emotions paint it. The Stoics had a word for the invisible threads that bind us together, sympatheia. Not just empathy or kindness, but a profound recognition that we're all pieces of a greater whole, like branches of the same ancient tree. Hierocles, a Stoic philosopher, visualized this with his famous circles of concern, a series of concentric rings radiating outward from the self, at the center, you. The next ring, family, then friends, neighbors, fellow citizens, and finally, all of humanity. His radical idea that wisdom lies in consciously drawing those outer circles inward, treating strangers as neighbors and neighbors as family. Imagine applying that to a fractured modern workplace where departments feud like rival tribes, or to a social media landscape that amplifies division. The Stoic challenge isn't just to see our connection to others, but to act on it, to widen our circles until they overlap. Think of a leader who transforms a disengaged team. She doesn't just manage tasks, she fosters sympatheia, highlighting how each person's work ripples through others. A software engineer's code isn't just lines on a screen. It's the foundation for a designer's interface, a marketer's campaign, a customer's experience. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What harms the hive harms the bee," he wasn't preaching idealism. He was stating a fact: survival depends on recognizing interdependence. History's most cohesive groups, from tight-knit military units to thriving startups, operate this way. They don't just tolerate interconnectedness, they weaponize it, turning collective responsibility into unbeatable momentum. Now bring this down to street level. That barrister who messed up your order, in hierarchical circles, she's not a stranger. She's someone's sister, someone's friend, someone fighting their own battles. The colleague who missed a deadline, maybe they're 2 rings closer to your center than you've acknowledged. Sympatheia asks, how can I act as if this person's well-being matters to mine? Not with grand gestures, but with micro shifts, listening fully instead of waiting to speak, assuming oversight before malice, offering help before being asked. So here's today's experiment. Pick one circle in your life that feels distant, a community group, a remote coworker, even a contentious neighbor. Then take one step to pull them closer. Share credit without being prompted. Ask about their challenges, not just their deliverables. Small acts of inclusion are how we turn philosophy into lived influence. Because when people feel seen as part of your circle, they don't just work for you, they work with you. And that's where true authority begins, not in commanding obedience, but in nurturing bonds that make commands unnecessary. Research shows the average person spends 52 minutes a day gossiping. That's over 300 hours a year, lost to conversations that drain energy instead of building it. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher whose lectures drew crowds in ancient Rome, put it bluntly: we should use our voice as we would money, sparingly and with purpose. Imagine if every word carried a price tag. How many of today's texts, hallway chats, or coffee break vents would suddenly seem like reckless spending? The Stoics didn't just avoid gossip, they saw speech as a sacred tool, one that could either forge trust or erode integrity with every syllable. Compare that to modern workplaces where water-cooler talk shapes reputations, or social media feeds that reward hot takes over thoughtful dialogue. The difference isn't just volume, it's intention. Take a typical office scenario. Someone shares a rumor about a colleague's promotion being unfair. The Stoic response isn't prudish silence, it's strategic restraint. Before speaking, they'd ask, does this uplift or improve? Is it true, necessary, and kind? If any answer is no, the words stay unspoken. This isn't about being bland or avoiding conflict. It's about refusing to trade in currency that devalues everyone. History's most respected leaders mastered this balance. When asked about rivals, Abraham Lincoln would redirect with, "I don't like that man. I must get to know him better." No slander, no posturing, just a refusal to let pettiness hijack his attention. Here's the challenge: try a 24-hour gossip fast. Not just avoiding lies or cruelty, but pausing before sharing any opinion about someone not present. Notice how often the urge arises to dissect a friend's choices, critique a stranger's outfit, or vent about a boss's decision. Each time, apply the Stoic triple filter. Is this true? Is it necessary? Does it serve? You'll likely find most chatter fails at least one test. But here's the surprise benefit. As gossip fades, space opens for conversations that actually matter: ideas, solutions, real connection. The power of silence isn't in what it withholds, but in what it creates. Like a sculptor chipping away excess stone to reveal the art beneath, cutting purposeless words reveals your true voice, one that carries weight because it isn't diluted by noise. So next time you're tempted to fuel the rumor mill, ask, is this the echo I want lingering in my character? Every obstacle carries a hidden instruction manual if you're willing to flip it upside down. The Stoics called this paratrope the art of inversion, and it transforms setbacks into the very fuel for your next breakthrough. Marcus Aurelius captured it in 4 words that changed history: the impediment becomes the way. Not in spite of the obstacle, but because of it. Think of a river blocked by boulders. Does it stop? No. It finds new channels, carving paths more intricate than any straight line could offer. That's inversion in motion, not just overcoming barriers, but repurposing their energy. Take J.K. Rowling's 12 publisher rejections for Harry Potter. Most would see that as proof to quit. She saw it as 12 rounds of free editing, each no, sharpening her pitch, tightening her plot, until the manuscript was undeniable. Or consider Thomas Edison's lab burning down at 67, destroying years of research. While reporters pitied him, he rallied his team. We just got rid of a lot of rubbish. Now we can rebuild better. Within weeks, he invented the phonograph. These weren't just comebacks, they were creative acts of alchemy, turning leaden setbacks into gold. So how do you practice this? Start by interrogating your obstacle like a detective. That project rejection, does it reveal a gap in your skills that, once filled, makes you unstoppable? The financial squeeze, is it forcing you to innovate in ways comfort never would? Even physical limitations can invert. Frida Kahlo's chronic pain birthed her surrealist masterpieces, while Beethoven's deafness birthed symphonies no one had ever heard before. The pattern is universal. Constraints don't cage genius, they direct it. Here's your inversion challenge. Grab a sheet of paper and draw 2 columns. On the left, list your current obstacle, the missed promotion, the creative block, the strained relationship. On the right, answer, how could this exact problem be the perfect training ground for what I need next? Maybe that unfair criticism is teaching you emotional resilience. Maybe the failed launch is highlighting a market need no one's addressing. The obstacle isn't the enemy, it's the uncanny ally you didn't recognize. Because when you stop resisting what stands in your way and start leveraging it, you unlock a paradoxical truth. The very thing you thought would break you becomes the tool that forges you. Seneca once warned, "It is not the person who has too little who is poor, but the one who craves more." That piercing insight cuts to the heart of practice 13, what the Stoics called practicing poverty, not as self-denial, but as vaccination against life's inevitable ups and downs. Picture 2 neighbors. One who panics when the market crashes because her identity is tied to luxury cars and designer labels, and another who drives a modest car, wears simple clothes, but wakes up each morning with unshakable peace. The difference isn't wealth, it's wealth immunity. The Stoics weren't against abundance, they were against dependence. They knew that the tighter we cling to comfort, the harder life shakes us when it's ripped away. History's most resilient minds trained for this. Seneca, one of Rome's richest men, routinely lived on bread and water for days to remind himself, "This is what I feared." He called it testing poverty by experiment, not because he enjoyed hardship, but because he refused to let luxury become a necessity. Fast forward to modern Silicon Valley, where tech CEOs making 7 figures still wear the same plain T-shirts daily. It's not a fashion statement, it's a psychological hack. When you deliberately strip away excess, you expose the truth. Most of what we chase isn't happiness, it's just habit. Here's how to build this immunity today. Start with a minimalist challenge. Delete shopping apps for a week, not as punishment but as research. Notice the itch to scroll through sales, the phantom limb of consumerism. Then go deeper. Try a no-spend day where you pack lunch, skip coffee runs, and repurpose what you already own. The goal isn't to live forever in scarcity, but to prove to yourself that you can. Because when you know you're okay without the extras, something shifts. That promotion bonus becomes freedom instead of fuel for more debt. That sudden job loss stings but doesn't paralyze. The real luxury isn't owning things, it's not being owned by them. So this week, ask yourself, what's one comfort I can temporarily shed to strengthen my resilience? Maybe it's unsubscribing from promotional emails or turning a shopping trip into a closet inventory. Each small act of voluntary simplicity isn't just saving money, it's buying back your peace of mind. Because the person who can thrive with less will always be richer than the one who crumbles without more. Your mid-argument, fingers hovering over the keyboard, that fiery email reply already half-written, when suddenly you freeze. That split-second hesitation, that's the Stoic pause in action, and it might be the most powerful gap between stimulus and response you'll ever master. Epictetus, who knew firsthand how quickly anger can burn bridges, laid down the rule: when you're offended, don't react, step back, the matter can wait. Not because the issue isn't important, but because no truth was ever discovered in a hurricane of emotion. Think about the last time you regretted a message sent in haste. Now imagine if you'd inserted just 10 deliberate breaths between feeling and action. How differently would that conversation have gone? Consider a CEO staring at a scathing email from a board member. The first draft of her reply is defensive, packed with counterarguments, but instead of hitting send, she employs the Stoic pause, closing her laptop, taking a walk, even sleeping on it. By morning, she sees the critique not as an attack, but as a misalignment of expectations. Her revised response: let's discuss how we can get on the same page. That shift from reactive to strategic is the difference between burning a bridge and building a better one. The pause doesn't weaken your position, it clarifies it. Here's how to practice this tomorrow. Identify your trigger points. Maybe it's a colleague's passive-aggressive Slack messages or a family member's dismissive comments. Then script your pause, literally. Post a note where you'll see it. Breathe first, type never. Better yet, draft a placeholder response you can use in any heated moment. I want to give this the attention it deserves. Let me reflect and circle back. This isn't avoidance, it's emotional jiu-jitsu, using the weight of haste to throw you into balance. The magic lies in recognizing that every emotion has a half-life. Anger cools, fear dissipates, even joy mellows. The Stoic pause lets you ride that curve so you respond from your values, not your volatility. So tonight, ask yourself, Where's one situation tomorrow where inserting a 5-minute pause could change everything? Because in that space between what happens and what you do about it, you'll find something rare, the power to choose your character, not just your words. Picture standing at a crossroads where every path tests your patience, a delayed flight, a rude comment, a plan crumbling last minute. Now imagine an inner compass pointing unerringly toward calm. That's the power of modeling the sage, the Stoic practice of channeling wisdom's archetype in moments of friction. The ancient Stoics didn't just study philosophy, they embodied it through mental models, asking themselves, what would Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, do here? Or Epictetus, the former slave-turned-teacher, or Cato, who chose death over compromising his principles. These weren't abstract thought experiments, they were lifelines to clarity. Consider the traits these sages shared: unshakable equanimity in chaos, radical ownership of their responses, and a laser focus on virtue over vanity. Zeno, after losing his fortune in a shipwreck, famously declared, "Fortune commands me to be a philosopher with less distraction." That's not resilience, it's alchemy, turning loss into liberation. Fast forward to modern mentors like Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison yet emerged without bitterness, or Warren Buffett, whose frugality and long-term thinking mirror Stoic ataraxia, tranquility. The common thread: they didn't just know principles, they lived them as second nature. Here's how to make this practical. First, identify one Stoic trait you most admire. Maybe Marcus Aurelius's discipline in journaling, or Seneca's ability to write with clarity even while exiled. Now pick a modern figure who embodies that quality. Perhaps it's a colleague who handles crises with eerie calm, or a historical figure like Viktor Frankl, who found meaning in Auschwitz's horrors. Keep their example vivid in your mind's eye. The next time you're tempted to snap at a careless driver or spiral over rejection, pause and ask, how would your chosen model navigate this? This isn't about perfection, it's about progression. No sage woke up wise, they practiced wisdom until it became reflex. So start small. If you're drawn to Epictetus's humility, catch yourself the next time you feel the urge to one-up someone in conversation. If Marcus's morning reflections inspire you, spend 5 minutes each dawn aligning your intentions with your values. The goal isn't to mimic another's life, but to borrow their lens until your own vision clears. Because when you consistently act as if you embody the traits you admire, something shifts. You stop pretending to be steadfast and start becoming it. Tonight, try this. Jot down one challenge you're facing, then script how your chosen sage would respond. Not a theoretical answer, but a concrete action. How they'd phrase that difficult email, handle a child's tantrum, or process a career setback. Then step into that role just for a day. You might find their wisdom wasn't meant to be studied. It was meant to be worn like armor until it shapes the way you move through the world. Marcus Aurelius kept a chilling reminder in his private journal. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Now apply that razor to our modern obsession with followers, likes, and viral moments. How many of those pixels would still glow in the face of mortality? The 16th Stoic practice cuts straight through our cultural addiction to applause, contempt for fame, not as cynicism, but as liberation from chasing what evaporates the moment you grasp it. The Roman emperor, arguably one of the most powerful men in history, wrote, "Everything fades into obscurity and soon is lost in oblivion." 2,000 years later, we're still scrambling for digital trophies that'll be buried under tomorrow's algorithm. Consider the cautionary tale of a once beloved celebrity. Let's call him Alex. Years ago, Alex's face was everywhere. Magazine covers, endorsement deals, a social media empire built on carefully curated perfection. Then one ill-advised tweet, one moment of unguarded honesty that didn't fit the brand, and the same crowd that cheered turned vicious. Sponsors vanished. The blue checkmark faded. Alex later confessed in an interview, "I spent years building a monument to myself only to realize it was made of sand." The Stoics would nod knowingly. Fame isn't evil, it's just indifferent, a fickle god that demands everything and guarantees nothing. As Seneca warned, what difference does it make how much is laid away in a man's safe or in his barns if he is always working for more, if he's always calculating his profits? Substitute likes for profits, and you've diagnosed our age. Here's the uncomfortable question: whose opinion truly shapes your choices? Not the anonymous trolls or the fleeting trends, but the people whose respect you'd still want on your last day, mentors who challenged you, loved ones who saw you unvarnished, the younger version of yourself who dreamed with pure intent. When the Stoics spoke of contempt for fame, they weren't dismissing connection. They were drawing a map back to what endures. A musician who plays for the joy of craft rather than chart positions wakes up fulfilled whether the arena's full or empty. A writer more concerned with truth than hot takes builds something that outlasts the news cycle. Try this audit today. Scroll through your last week's social posts. How many were performative, crafted to impress or provoke versus authentic expressions? Then dig deeper. What would you create if no one were watching? Because that's often where real influence begins, not in the spotlight, but in the quiet work you do even if it never trended. The irony: those who stop chasing fame often earn the only kind worth having, respect that lingers long after the applause fades. Marcus Aurelius often spoke of an inner citadel, a mental fortress so impregnable that no external chaos could breach its walls. Picture a stone stronghold on a stormy cliffside, waves crashing below, winds howling, yet inside, a quiet fire burns undisturbed. That's the Stoic mind under pressure, not numb to reality, but rooted so deeply in principle that panic finds no foothold. He wrote in Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. This wasn't poetry, it was psychological armor. When barbarians threatened Rome's borders or political betrayals unfolded in his court, Marcus retreated not to a physical bunker, but to this inner sanctuary where clarity outlasted fear. Modern crises demand the same blueprint. Imagine your startup's funding falls through. Colleagues panic, investors retreat, but inside your citadel, the questions are different. What can I control right now? What's the next rational step? Or picture a medical scare, test results looming, unknowns multiplying. The untrained mind spirals into what ifs, but the citadel's walls hold space for a quieter voice. I'll face what comes with the resources I have. The power isn't in denying hardship, it's in metabolizing it without becoming it. Let's build yours now. Close your eyes, or if you're driving or multitasking, just follow this voice. Picture a fortress carved from the sturdiest material you can imagine: granite, iron, ancient oak. Its doors are thick, its walls high. Now step inside. Feel the solidity underfoot. This is your space of sovereignty. No outside noise enters unless you permit it. Now furnish it with what anchors you, perhaps a shelf of your core values: integrity, courage, compassion. A hearth with the wisdom of mentors, living or gone. A window that lets you observe chaos without being swept into it. When stress surges, a layoff notice, a relationship fracture, a public failure, you don't have to react from the storm. Retreat here first, breathe, ask, what would my steadiest self do? The citadel isn't escapism, it's the control room where you switch from reactive to strategic. History's most resilient figures operated from this center. When Shackleton's ship was crushed in Antarctic ice, he didn't waste energy cursing the cold. He gathered his crew in their mental citadel. We'll eat the sled dogs if we must, but we're getting home. When Maya Angelou faced censorship and prejudice, she wrote, "You may shoot me with your words, but my soul remains unshaken." That's the citadel in action, not the absence of fear, but the presence of something stronger. Your challenge tonight: spend 5 minutes reinforcing your fortress. Visualize its details. Then, when tomorrow's crisis hits a traffic jam, a harsh email, a personal setback, pause, touch the walls in your mind. The storm rages, but inside, the fire burns steady. Because the ultimate Stoic truth is this: no one can take your citadel unless you hand them the keys. Your worst enemy lies in your head, that voice whispering you're always right, that reflex to defend rather than learn, that invisible wall between you and growth. Epictetus put it bluntly: it is impossible for a person to begin learning what he thinks he already knows. Let that sink in. How many breakthroughs have you missed because your ego mistook curiosity for weakness? History's graveyard of failed ventures is littered with founders who couldn't hear this truth. Take the tech CEO who dismissed user feedback on his app's flaws, convinced his vision was infallible. By the time he admitted the design was confusing, competitors had already stolen his market. His product didn't fail, his humility did. Ego isn't just arrogance, it's the subtle resistance to feedback, the need to be the smartest person in the room, even the quiet resentment when someone else shines. Imagine a senior engineer refusing to learn a junior colleague's coding shortcut because "I've been doing this for 20 years. That's ego masquerading as experience. Or the writer who treats every edit as a personal attack rather than a chance to refine her work. The common thread, a fragile self-image that mistakes adaptation for surrender. Here's the paradox: true confidence isn't threatened by growth, it craves it. When the Stoics spoke of death to ego, they weren't advocating self-erasure. They were prescribing the antidote to self-sabotage. Consider how Abraham Lincoln filled his cabinet with former rivals, people who'd openly mocked him. Their expertise mattered more than his pride. Or how Serena Williams, at the height of her career, still hired coaches to dissect her weaknesses. Humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less so you can focus on what actually matters. So where's your ego blocking you right now? Maybe it's that project you're avoiding because you'd have to start as a beginner again. That relationship where you'd rather be right than reconnect. That feedback you dismissed because it came from someone less experienced. Try this for one day. Replace "I know" with "teach me." Notice how often your instinct is to defend rather than explore. Because here's the secret the Stoics knew: the moment you stop protecting your ego is the moment you start expanding your potential. The ground where ego dies becomes fertile soil for everything else to grow. Cleans, the second leader of the Stoic school, carved his philosophy into a single, razor-sharp distinction. Motion isn't action. Think about that for a moment. How many times have you collapsed into bed after a frenzied day, only to realize you've been spinning in circles, answering emails, attending meetings, scrolling feeds, without moving the needle on anything that truly matters? The ancient Stoics saw this trap clearly. Motion is the illusion of progress, the busy work that fills time but drains purpose. Action, by contrast, is the deliberate step that bends reality toward your intentions. It's the difference between rearranging your desk and finally drafting that proposal, between complaining about a problem and solving it. Consider two entrepreneurs launching similar ventures. One spends months perfecting a logo, tweaking website colors, and brainstorming taglines motion. The other launches a bare-bones prototype within weeks, gathers real user feedback, and iterates action. Both are working hard, but only one is creating measurable forward momentum. History's most effective figures mastered this discernment. Theodore Roosevelt famously blocked his schedule into chunks of execution time, periods where no distractions were allowed, only decisions and deeds that advanced his goals. He didn't just work, he worked on purpose. Here's the litmus test at day's end. Does your exhaustion come from creating tangible results or just from burning energy? That busy feeling is often a smokescreen, a way to avoid the discomfort of real, consequential effort. The Stoics called this the discipline of action, the practice of aligning every effort with intent. Marcus Aurelius journaled nightly, auditing his actions like a strict accountant. What did I do today that wasn't just motion? Where did I confuse activity with achievement? Your challenge: cut one empty activity this week, not to create space for more busyness, but to carve room for what moves the needle. Maybe it's that habitual scroll through social media first thing in the morning. Swap it for 20 minutes of deep work on your most neglected priority. Or that weekly meeting that's become a ritual without results. Cancel it and use the time to tackle the project everyone keeps avoiding. The goal isn't to do less, but to matter more. Because when you stop mistaking motion for progress, you start wielding time like a sculptor wields a chisel, removing everything that doesn't reveal the masterpiece beneath. The irony: those who master this discipline often accomplish more by doing less. They don't just cross items off lists, they cross off entire lists that shouldn't exist. So ask yourself right now, what's one motion in your life masquerading as action? And what would happen if you replaced it with something that actually leaves a mark? The answer might just reveal the hidden leverage you've been overlooking all along. Seneca once wrote a letter to his friend Marcia, who was paralyzed by grief after losing her son. His advice wasn't to suppress her pain, but to confront it before it arrived, to rehearse tragedy in advance. At first glance, this seems counterintuitive, even cruel. Why dwell on loss when life offers enough hardship? But here's the Stoic twist: by mentally walking through worst-case scenarios, we don't invite suffering, we disarm it. Negative visualization isn't about pessimism, it's about vaccination. Just as exposing the body to weakened viruses builds immunity, exposing the mind to imagined loss builds emotional resilience. Picture waking up tomorrow to find your car stolen. The initial shock would sting, but if you'd already mentally rehearsed that moment, visualizing the inconvenience, the paperwork, the temporary adjustment, the blow loses its power to derail you. History's most grounded minds used this practice. King Solomon, renowned for his wisdom, wrote, "Better to go to the house of mourning than the house of feasting, not to wallow in sadness, but to remember life's fragility." Modern psychology echoes this. Studies show that people who regularly reflect on potential losses report higher gratitude and lower anxiety. Take a musician who imagines losing the use of her hands. The exercise isn't morbid, it's clarifying. Suddenly, every chord she plays becomes a gift, not a given, or a CEO who visualizes his company's collapse. The mental rehearsal doesn't paralyze him, it sharpens his vigilance for risks he might otherwise ignore. Now bring this home, tonight, as you tuck your child into bed or call a parent. Pause. Close your eyes and picture life without that voice, that laugh, that presence. Notice how your chest tightens. Now open your eyes. See how the ordinary glow of their existence, the messy hair, the familiar cadence of their speech suddenly shimmers with new light. That's negative visualization's alchemy. It doesn't just prepare us for loss, it reveals the abundance we've been too busy to see. The practice works for smaller treasures too. That morning coffee routine you rush through, imagine losing your sense of taste. The commute you resent, picture being bedridden. Even frustration transforms when viewed through the lens of absence. The colleague who annoys you becomes a gift when you consider the office without their quirks. The traffic jam becomes a privilege when you remember not everyone has a car to sit in. So here's your challenge. Pick one daily blessing: your health, your job, a relationship, and spend 60 seconds imagining its absence. Not to dwell in fear, but to return to the present with eyes wide open. Because the Stoics knew a secret modern life obscures, gratitude isn't passive. It's a muscle strengthened by conscious contrast, and the more we practice seeing without, the more we learn to truly see within. Cicero once compared life to archery. The archer must do all he can to aim true, but once the arrow leaves the bow, its course is no longer in his power. That image captures the 21st Stoic practice with perfect clarity, the discipline of focusing relentlessly on your effort while releasing attachment to outcomes. Picture an Olympic archer moments before competition. Her entire routine is a masterpiece of control: the measured breath, the precise finger placement, the unwavering gaze on the target. But here's what separates the Stoic competitor from the anxious one. The moment her fingers release the string, she doesn't tense for applause or brace for disappointment. She's already preparing for the next shot, the target's outcome that belongs to the wind, to luck, to 1,000 variables she'll never command, but the integrity of her form. That's hers forever. This principle shatters the modern myth that success equals control. Consider a startup founder pitching to investors. She can rehearse until her pitch is flawless, research each panelist's interests, and tailor her presentation with surgical precision. But if the market crashes that morning or a key investor has a family emergency, the outcome detaches from her effort like that arrow from the bow. The Stoic founder knows this. She measures her performance not by the check she hopes to secure, but by the mastery she brought to the attempt. As Epictetus put it, in life, our first job is this: to divide and distinguish things into two categories: externals beyond my control and choices within my power. Now apply this to your daily targets. That job application, you're obsessing over how much energy are you spending refreshing your inbox versus honing skills for the next opportunity. The creative project you're afraid to launch, are you paralyzed by visions of criticism or focused on the work itself? The Stoic archer doesn't ask, will I hit the bullseye? But did I hold nothing back in my aim? Here's the litmus test. When you lay your head on the pillow tonight, ask not whether the world gave you what you wanted, but whether you gave the world what you had. Because the irony of releasing outcomes is this: those who focus purely on their effort often achieve more than those fixated on results. The archer who chases medals tenses at the critical moment. The one who chases excellence, her arrow finds its mark almost by accident. So today, pick one target in your life, professional, personal, creative, and for 24 hours, care only about the quality of your draw. The release will take care of itself. Seneca wrote letters not just to share wisdom, but to build mental muscle, each sentence a weight to lift, each idea a stretch for the mind. In one famous correspondence, he scolded his friend Lucilius for racing through books like a tourist snapping photos. You must linger among a limited number of master thinkers and digest their works if you would derive ideas which shall win firm hold in your mind. That's the difference between reading for information and reading for transformation. Think of your brain as an athlete's body. Scrolling headlines is like eating candy for breakfast, while absorbing a single page of Marcus Aurelius is a protein-rich meal that fuels lasting strength. Consider two professionals preparing for a high-stakes negotiation. One skims the latest business trends on his phone during the commute. The other spends 20 minutes each morning with Sun Tzu's The Art of War, not just reading but wrestling with passages, scribbling notes in the margins about how ancient strategy applies to modern boardrooms. Who enters the meeting room with deeper insight? The Stoics treated books as sparring partners, not entertainment. Epictetus, who taught from a simple classroom in Greece, demanded his students, write down my words, but more importantly, write them on your soul. Every underlined sentence, every dog-eared page was a rep in the gym of character. Here's the challenge hiding in plain sight. We've confused quantity for quality. A shelf of unread bestsellers gathers dust while dog-eared copies of Meditations or Seneca's letters, wrinkled from bathwater, stained with coffee, show real engagement. Naval Ravikant, the tech entrepreneur, carries the Bhagavad Gita everywhere, reading the same verses for decades because the book doesn't change, I do. That's the mark of a true classic. It grows as you grow, revealing new layers each time you return. So this month, pick one philosophy book not to finish but to work with. Try Epictetus's Enchiridion, a pocket-sized manual for resilience. Read a page each morning, then carry its question into your day. Is this within my control? Or dive into Seneca's On the Shortness of Life, letting his urgency about time jolt you from complacency. Don't rush. Highlight sentences that sting or soothe. Argue with the text in the margins. A single chapter digested deeply will outlast a dozen books skimmed, because as Seneca warned, to be everywhere is to be nowhere. The same applies to reading. Collecting titles impresses others. Immersing in wisdom transforms you. The irony, in an age of infinite content, the real edge goes to those brave enough to go slow. While others drown in shallow streams of information, you'll be diving deep, emerging with treasures that don't fade when the screen goes dark. So tonight, power down the devices crowding your nightstand. Reach for one book that survived centuries, not because it's old, but because it's alive, and let its words, like a skilled coach, train you for battles no algorithm could predict. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher whose lectures drew crowds in ancient Rome, left us a radical question. What wouldn't you lack if you lost it? Not what to add, but what to strip away. That's the art of subtraction, the 23rd Stoic practice that flips modern productivity on its head. While the world obsesses over hacks and hustle, the real leverage lies in elimination. Picture Warren Buffett's famed not-to-do list. Unlike most executives cramming schedules with back-to-back meetings, the billionaire investor built his empire by systematically removing distractions, saying no to unnecessary commitments, ignoring market noise, even leaving his calendar startlingly empty. His secret wasn't doing more things right, it was doing fewer things, period. Consider the clutter in your own life, the apps draining attention, the obligations that feel like chores, the productive habits that actually dilute focus. The Stoics saw simplicity not as deprivation, but as precision. Seneca pared his letters down to essential truths, cutting flowery language because wherever I stop, that's the ending. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire with a tiny inner circle, writing, "The more we limit our actions, the more effective they become." This isn't minimalism for aesthetics, it's subtraction as strategy. A chef doesn't improve a dish by adding every spice she removes until only the essential flavors remain. Here's the modern twist. Distraction isn't just about time, it's about mental real estate. Every unused app on your phone, every half-finished project, even that stack of unread books gathering dust, they're not neutral. They whisper guilt, fragment attention, and create phantom obligations. Psychologists call this decision fatigue, the toll of constant low-level choices. But the Stoic solution isn't better organization, it's ruthless removal. Try this audit today. Open your phone's settings and check screen time, which apps are passive drains versus active tools, then move to your workspace. What's physically present that doesn't serve a purpose? Finally, your commitments. That monthly meeting that's become ritual without results, could it die quietly? The goal isn't emptiness but clarity, like a sculptor chipping away marble to reveal the statue within. Subtraction exposes your true priorities. So here's your challenge. What's one subtraction waiting to happen? Maybe it's muting a group chat that breeds anxiety instead of connection, deleting the news app that fuels outrage without insight, or even something as simple as clearing your desk to bare essentials before starting work. Because mastery begins not with what you take on, but with what you dare to let go. And the paradox, those who subtract first often accomplish more than those who add endlessly. The uncluttered mind, like an uncluttered bow, sends its arrows straight and true. Marcus Aurelius once stood in the pouring rain, watching it ruin his carefully planned military parade. Instead of cursing the skies, he scribbled in his journal, "The rain is indifferent. It falls on the just and the unjust alike." That's cosmic indifference, nature's refusal to care about our plans, our feelings, or our sense of fairness. The storm doesn't target you, it simply exists. A flight gets cancelled, a deal falls through, a first date ghosts you. None of it is personal. The universe isn't conspiring against you. It's just moving like the tide without malice or mercy. Think of a farmer planting seeds in spring. He tills the soil, waters the rows, prays for sun. But when hailstorms crush his crops, the sky doesn't apologize. Nature doesn't keep score. Modern life obscures this truth. We internalize every setback as if the world singled us out. Why does this always happen to me? But the Stoics whisper, it's not happening to you, it's just happening. The recruiter who rejected your resume wasn't rejecting you. They were solving a puzzle with different shaped pieces. The traffic jam that made you late wasn't a personal affront. It was 100 unrelated decisions colliding like atoms. Here's the freedom in this practice. When you stop taking life's randomness personally, you reclaim energy previously wasted on resistance. Picture two travelers stranded at the same airport. One fumes at the airline staff, tweets angrily about karma, and tightens his jaw until it aches. The other pulls out a book, texts a friend nearby for coffee, and adjusts his plans like a sailor trimming sails to the wind. Both face the same storm, only one drowns in it. Your challenge: identify your latest rain moment. Maybe it was a client backing out last minute or a friend forgetting your birthday. Now ask, did this actually target me, or did I just stand where the drops fell? The shift isn't about passivity, it's about precision. You can't stop the rain, but you can choose to stop melting under it. Because when you stop shouting at the sky, you start noticing the shelter you've had all along. Seneca once observed that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so we can listen twice as much as we speak, a principle that transforms conflict from battlefield to classroom. The Stoic handshake isn't about avoiding disagreement. It's about mastering the art of gracious opposition, where every clash becomes an opportunity to strengthen ideas rather than egos. Picture 2 philosophers debating ethics in the Athenian marketplace, voices firm but faces calm, each pausing to truly hear the other before responding. That's the model: tension without toxicity, rigor without rancor. In our age of polarized shouting matches, this practice isn't just philosophical, it's revolutionary. Consider how most workplace conflicts unfold. A project manager critiques a design, and the designer immediately scrambles to defend choices rather than explore improvements. The conversation spirals into wounded silence or heated exchanges, leaving both parties bruised and the work unresolved. Now reimagine that moment with Stoic grace. The manager frames feedback as collaborative inquiry. Help me understand this color choice. while the designer responds with curiosity rather than defensiveness. What alternative were you envisioning? The disagreement remains, but the energy shifts from combat to craftsmanship. Here's how to cultivate this rare skill. First, adopt the 3-breath rule. When you feel your pulse quicken in disagreement, take 3 deliberate breaths while silently repeating Seneca's reminder. The quarrel is about the issue, not the person. This creates space between stimulus and response, allowing you to engage rather than react. Next, practice the mirror pivot technique in low-stakes disputes with a partner or even in mirror rehearsals. Mirror the other's core point before presenting your view. You're saying the timeline is unrealistic because of vendor delays. Here's why I think we can mitigate that. This simple acknowledgement disarms defensiveness while maintaining rigor. Your challenge: initiate one intentionally disagreeable conversation this week, not to win, but to practice losing gracefully. Maybe it's discussing politics with a relative whose views make your jaw clench, or revisiting a creative decision at work where you previously dug in your heels. Approach it as an anthropologist might. What can this person's perspective teach me about blind spots in my own thinking? The goal isn't consensus, it's comprehension. Because when you stop fearing conflict and start shaping it, you'll find even opposition can become a form of respect. After all, iron sharpens iron not through harmony, but through friction handled well. Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, once told his students, "Hard training, easy combat, easy training, hard combat." That brutal simplicity cuts through centuries of human excuses like a sword through fog. The Stoics didn't see discipline as deprivation, they saw it as liberation. Every cold morning run, every resisted temptation, every hour spent mastering a skill was another brick in the fortress of their autonomy. Picture a Navy SEAL during Hell Week, 5 days of sleeplessness, icy ocean plunges, and relentless physical torment. Why volunteer for such agony? Because when life's real battles come, whether it's a financial crash, a health crisis, or a moral crossroads, the person who's trained their mind and body to operate under strain doesn't collapse. They adapt. This isn't about masochism, it's about sovereignty. The athlete who drags herself out of bed at 4:45 to lift weights isn't punishing herself, she's stockpiling resilience. The writer who finishes his draft before checking email isn't denying pleasure, he's claiming creative control. Even small acts of discipline compound like interest. Skip the snooze button once and it's a fluke. Do it for a month and you've rewritten your identity. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, began each day with rigorous self-examination. When you wake, ask yourself, what virtue will I strengthen today? Not what comfort will I indulge, but what weakness will I conquer? Here's your boot camp challenge. Pick 1 week to test your mettle with a 5 a.m. wake-up ritual. No caffeine loopholes, no phone scrolling, just you, the quiet dark, and a single intentional act. Maybe it's 20 minutes of journaling like Marcus, a cold shower to shock your system awake, or even just sitting in stillness before the world demands your attention. Notice what happens when you voluntarily step into discomfort before life forces you there. The first day feels like rebellion against your own biology. By day 7, you'll glimpse the secret seal and Stoics share. Discipline isn't a cage, it's the key that unlocks the door to your highest potential. The irony: those who fear rigor as confinement are already prisoners of impulse, of distraction, of other people's agendas. Meanwhile, the ones embracing structure discover something unexpected. True freedom isn't the absence of limits. It's the presence of enough self-command to thrive within them. So set the alarm tonight. Tomorrow's dawn won't ask if you're ready, it'll simply arrive. The question is, will you meet it as a recruit or a warrior? Cleans, the Stoic philosopher who carried water by night to fund his studies, left us a mental hack that outsmarts disappointment. Lead me, Zeus, where you will, but only if I'm willing to follow. That tiny conditional if holds the key to the 27th practice. The reserve clause isn't about passive surrender to fate. It's about active collaboration with reality. Picture a tech founder who pours everything into her original vision, a revolutionary app for gourmet home cooks. She secures funding, hires a team, builds the product. Then the market responds with a shrug. The Stoic founder doesn't double down on denial or collapse in despair. She adds two silent words to every plan, fate permitting. Not as defeat, but as strategic flexibility. Her pivot, a streamlined version for busy parents needing quick meal solutions. The original dream wasn't wrong. It was just incomplete until reality sculpted it further. This mental maneuver transforms how we set goals. Most modern ambition comes with invisible fine print. This must happen exactly as I envision it, but the Stoics wrote their plans in pencil with an eraser handy. When Seneca advised, make your plans flexible, he wasn't preaching low standards, he was engineering antifragility. Consider two athletes training for the Olympics. One fixates on gold or nothing, structuring every workout toward that single outcome. The other trains just as hard but whispers fate permitting, knowing injuries, judging biases, or simply a rival's transcendent performance could alter the result. Both give their all, but only one carries the emotional armor to handle life's curveballs without fracturing. Your turn to audit. Where's your grip tightest right now? That 5-year career plan etched in stone, the relationship that must work out a certain way. Even smaller expectations, the vacation that'll be ruined if it rains, the presentation that's worthless if the client frowns once. These are rigidity in disguise. Try this rewrite. I'll deliver the best presentation possible, fate permitting the client's receptivity. Suddenly, your worth detaches from their reaction. You control preparation, they control response. Both truths can coexist without conflict. History's most adaptable innovators thrived on this balance. Darwin didn't board the beagle intending to overturn centuries of biology. He followed the evidence where it led, fate permitting. The Wright brothers didn't fixate on powered flight alone. They iterated through gliders, understanding each crash as data, not failure. The reserve clause isn't a hedge against effort. It's a reminder that effort meets opportunity in unpredictable ways. Tonight, pick one cherished assumption about how things should unfold. Then whisper the Stoic amendment, or whatever better version reality has in store. The paradox, those who hold plans lightly often achieve more than those who white-knuckle them. Because flexibility isn't the enemy of ambition, it's the secret ingredient no one told you about. The path to your destination may not be the one you mapped, but the one that reveals itself when you're brave enough to redraw the route. Life is long if you know how to use it. Seneca's razor-sharp observation cuts through the modern illusion that time slips through our fingers, the truth. We don't lack time, we misplace it. Think about the last week. How many hours evaporated into the black hole of autoplay episodes, doom scrolling, or rehearsing conversations that never happened? The Stoics measured life not in years, but in attention, those rare moments when we're fully present, fully engaged. Seneca watched wealthy Romans spend fortunes on exotic foods and lavish baths, then wrote, "They act as if they will live forever, but lose each day as it comes." Swap ancient decadence for modern distractions, and the pattern holds. That hour lost to binge watching isn't neutral, it's a withdrawal from the finite account of your life. Let's make this tangible. Grab your phone and check screen time. The average person spends 3 hours daily on social media alone. That's 60 full days a year. Now imagine handing those days to your future self. What could you create, master, repair? The difference between a life that feels expansive and one that feels fleeting isn't the calendar, it's consciousness. A gardener who notices each bud's unfurling lives longer in a single spring than a distracted traveler who barely registers whole seasons. Here's the antidote: a time budget. Not another rigid schedule, but a ruthless audit. Divide a sheet into 3 columns. First, essential sleep, meals, work that aligns with purpose. Second, enriching learning, creating, connecting deeply. Third, empty, everything that leaves you numb rather than nourished. Most people find their third column dwarfs the others. Now the radical part: for 1 week, shift just 30 minutes daily from empty to enriching. Read Seneca instead of clickbait. Walk without headphones, training yourself to notice the world. Call someone who sharpens your thinking, the miracle. Small reallocations compound. An hour a week spent learning a language becomes fluency in years. 15 minutes daily journaling builds a map of your inner landscape. Even trivial redirections matter. Skipping 1 episode to draft that business idea or mend a strained relationship, because the Stoic secret isn't adding years to your life, but life to your years. Time doesn't vanish. We simply stop seeing it until we learn to weigh each moment like the currency it is. Tonight, ask yourself, what's one empty calorie activity I can replace with something that echoes? Not to optimize every second, but to ensure more of them resonate, because the paradox Seneca uncovered still holds. The busiest people often feel the poorest in time, while those who guard their attention discover days stretch like sunlight on water, abundant, shimmering, and far more vast than they seemed. Epictetus threw down a challenge that still echoes across centuries. When the light of dawn comes, ask yourself, who do you see in the mirror, a slave or a sovereign? That question isn't about status or wealth, it's about sovereignty over your own mind. The Stoic mirror isn't glass, it's the merciless clarity of solitude, the kind that reveals whether you're living by design or default. Think about your own morning ritual. Do you reach for the phone before your feet hit the floor, flooding your still soft consciousness with the world's chaos before you've even met your own? The ancient Stoics called this prosouch attention to the self before the self gets buried under the day's demands. Modern life has turned this into a relic. We've replaced dawn's quiet with podcasts in the shower, news alerts with our coffee, and the mirror's gaze with the glow of screens. But here's what we lose in that bargain: the chance to choose who we'll be before the world tells us. Consider 2 executives starting their days. One wakes to a blaring alarm, scans emails before brushing his teeth, and hustles into meetings with a mind already cluttered by other people's priorities. The other rises 10 minutes earlier, sits by a window with nothing but steam curling from her tea, and lets the silence settle like dust in sunlight. That empty space isn't passive, it's the forge where intention gets hammered into shape. Marcus Aurelius wrote Meditations not for publication, but as pre-dawn dialogue with his own conscience. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. Note the verb think, not react, not consume, not perform. Now try this experiment. For 1 week, carve 10 minutes of pure silence between waking and doing. No music, no news, no scrolling, just you and the weight of Epictetus's question. At first, it might feel like staring into a void, itchy, uncomfortable, even frightening. That's the point. The modern mind, addicted to constant input, treats solitude like withdrawal. But lean into the discomfort. Notice the thoughts that surface unchecked, the unresolved argument playing on loop, the half-formed idea you've been too busy to nurture, the quiet regret you've been numbing with busyness. This isn't meditation's blank slate, it's Stoicism's active interrogation. Who showed up today? The version of you that's easily rattled by traffic jams and office gossip, or the one who moves through chaos like a ship cutting through waves? History's most grounded leaders guarded this ritual like a sacred rite. Benjamin Franklin's famous morning question, "What good shall I do this day?" wasn't asked over breakfast chatter. He drank his tea in deliberate quiet, letting the answer rise from depth, not duty. The Stoics knew what neuroscience now confirms. Unstructured solitude isn't empty time, it's the incubator for self-awareness, the kind that separates reflexive reactions from chosen responses. So tomorrow, before you check the weather or your inbox, stand at the mirror, literally or metaphorically, and meet the person looking back, not with judgment but with clarity. Are they the author of today, or just another character in someone else's story? Because the truth the Stoics carved into their dawns is this: how you start determines who you become long before the world gets its hands on you. And that 10-minute silence, it's not a pause in your day. It's the first act of reclaiming it. Marcus Aurelius had a peculiar habit before leading his troops into battle. He'd stand motionless for several heartbeats, eyes closed, fingertips pressed together in silent ritual. Historians debate whether he was praying or meditating, but the Stoics knew the truth. He was activating what modern neuroscience calls an anchor, a deliberate trigger to shift from chaos to calm. This wasn't superstition, it was tactical. The battlefield of his mind needed preparation just like the battlefield beneath his feet. Fast forward to today, where the stakes may be lower, but the stakes feel just as high. A high-stakes presentation, a difficult conversation, even walking into a crowded room. The principle remains: equanimity isn't accidental, it's engineered. Start with the breath, the Stoic's secret weapon. Not the shallow, frantic gulps of panic, but the measured rhythm of a blacksmith pumping bellows. Try this now. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7, exhale for 8. Repeat 3 times. That's the physiological sigh, a breathing pattern studied at Stanford that resets your nervous system faster than caffeine or willpower. The magic lies in the ratios. The extended exhale signals safety to your primal brain, dialing down fight or flight mode. Ancient warriors knew this instinctively. Samurai would chant Nen, focus, with each exhale before drawing their swords. Roman centurions synchronized their marching steps to collective breathing. These weren't quirks, they were biohacks. Now make it yours. Design a calm trigger, a physical or mental cue that becomes your personal switch from turbulence to stillness. It could be as simple as straightening your posture and silently reciting Epictetus's reminder, "I control my choices, not outcomes," or tactile, like rubbing your thumb and forefinger together while visualizing an unshakable mountain. The key is repetition. Perform this ritual before stress hits, during your morning shower, in the elevator en route to the meeting, while waiting for the Zoom call to connect. Like Marcus before battle, you're not waiting for the storm to find you unprepared. You're building the shelter in advance. Apply this to public speaking, one of humanity's most universal fears. Most people waste their final backstage moments frantically rehearsing lines or ruminating on worst-case scenarios. The Stoic speaker does the opposite. She finds a quiet corner, plants her feet firmly, a stance neuroscientists call power posing, and performs her equanimity ritual, perhaps tracing the outline of a square with her breath. Inhale for 4 sides, hold for 4, exhale for 4. By the time she steps into the spotlight, her body believes what her mind knows. This isn't a threat, it's an opportunity. Your challenge: craft a 5-second version of this practice for emergencies, the kind you can deploy mid-conflict or before hitting send on that heated email. Maybe it's pressing your tongue to the roof of your mouth, a yogic technique to halt stress hormones, while mentally whispering, "This too shall pass." Or snapping a rubber band on your wrist as a physical reset. Test drive it today in low-stakes moments, waiting in line, stuck in traffic. So when real pressure comes, the ritual feels less like a life raft and more like an old friend. Because here's the paradox the Stoics uncovered. The people who appear unshakable in crisis aren't immune to stress. They've just rehearsed their composure so thoroughly that it shows up on command. The final layer: attach your ritual to something beautiful. Marcus often grounded himself by contemplating the vastness of the cosmos, remembering his smallness in space but his sovereignty in choice. Your version might be picturing a serene lake at dawn or recalling a moment you felt utterly capable. These mental images aren't escapism, they're neural armor. When the Roman general Scipio Africanus faced Hannibal's war elephants, creatures so terrifying they made veteran soldiers bolt, he reportedly smiled and murmured, "How magnificent." That's equanimity's ultimate goal, not just to endure chaos but to find awe in its midst. So design your trigger, then trust it. The calmer you are, the more the world leans in to hear what you have to say. Whose fault is this mess? The question hangs in the conference room like a blade. A project deadline was missed and fingers are already pointing. The designer blames the developer for late assets. The developer points to unclear requirements from the product manager, who in turn cites shifting priorities from leadership. This corporate blame tennis isn't just unproductive. It's the exact opposite of what Epictetus meant when he said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." The Stoic ownership mentality begins with a radical reframe. What if every problem, even those seemingly caused by others, contains a seed of your agency? Consider a real-world case. A marketing team's campaign underperforms. The junior copywriter blames the stale data from analytics. The data team fires back about last-minute changes to the creative brief. Meanwhile, the Stoic in the room asks a different question. Where did I contribute to this breakdown? Maybe the copywriter could have proactively requested fresher data. Perhaps the data team could have flagged potential pitfalls earlier. Ownership isn't about accepting unjust blame. It's about excavating every sliver of control you might have overlooked. When a ship sinks, the captain doesn't waste time cursing the storm. He checks for leaks he might have patched. Here's where modern workplaces get stuck. We've confused accountability with guilt. Taking ownership isn't saying, "This is all my fault." It's asking, "What's my next move to fix or learn from this?" Think of a surgeon scrubbing in for an emergency. If a nurse hands her the wrong instrument, she doesn't pause to lecture, she adapts. The stakes are too high for blame. The Stoics treated daily challenges with the same urgency. Now turn the lens inward. What problem have you been externalizing lately? The promotion you didn't get, have you honestly assessed where your skills might lack polish? The strained friendship, is there a pattern in how you handle conflict? Even traffic jams offer ownership opportunities. Leaving earlier, mapping alternate routes, or using the delay to listen to an audiobook that sharpens your mind. The ownership mentality isn't about self-flagellation. It's about reclaiming power from circumstances. Try this audit. The next time you catch yourself complaining about politics, your boss, even the weather, pause. Ask, what's one action I'm avoiding that could alter this situation? Often, you'll find the real obstacle wasn't out there at all. It was the story you told yourself about where your influence ended. Because here's the secret the Stoics knew. The moment you stop asking who's to blame and start asking what can I own, you stop being a passenger in your life and start steering. Seneca once wrote a letter to his friend Lucilius that contained a paradox. The more we seek to control, the less we truly command. At first glance, it sounds contradictory. How can releasing our grip actually strengthen our influence? But the Stoics weren't speaking in riddles. They were revealing a profound truth about power. Picture a gardener tending to a sapling. She can provide water, sunlight, and protection from pests, but she can't force the tree to grow. The moment she digs her fingers into the soil to pull the branches upward, she risks snapping the very thing she hopes to nurture. That's the paradox of control. Our greatest leverage often lies not in domination, but in wise detachment. Take parenting as a case study. A father micromanaging his teenagers' homework, friendships, and hobbies might secure short-term compliance, but at what cost? Resentment builds, creativity withers. The child either rebels or becomes dependent, neither outcome reflecting true guidance. Contrast this with the Stoic approach, setting clear boundaries like a trellis supports a vine, then stepping back to let growth unfold. The parent who says, "I'll teach you how to study, but the effort is yours," isn't relinquishing responsibility, they're cultivating resilience, the irony. Children raised with this balance of structure and autonomy often internalize their parents' values more deeply than those under constant surveillance. This principle scales to leadership too. Consider a CEO who obsesses over every spreadsheet cell and marketing slogan. Her team, starved of autonomy, either waits for directives or hides mistakes to avoid scrutiny. Now imagine her counterpart, the one who articulates a vivid vision, equips her people with tools and trust, then focuses on removing roadblocks rather than dictating steps. Which company innovates faster, adapts smoother, retains talent longer? The answer lies in Seneca's admonition. No wind favors the sailor who knows not where he's bound. Clarity of direction matters more than control of every wave. Now turn the lens inward. Where are you over-gripping? That project you can't delegate because no one does it right. Could that perfectionism be stifling your team's growth? The relationship where you replay conversations like a director demanding retakes. Are you scripting a partnership or a monologue? Even our self-improvement journeys fall prey to this. The dieter who punishes every calorie deviation often binges. The one who focuses on nourishment without obsession finds lasting change. The Stoic reframe is simple but radical. Influence isn't about holding the reins tightly. It's about knowing when to loosen them without losing your way. Like a seasoned sailor adjusting sails to the wind rather than fighting it, your power grows when you stop confusing control with command. So tonight, ask yourself, what's one area where my white-knuckled grip might actually be weakening my hold? The answer might just reveal where your true authority begins and where your futile struggle ends. Marcus Aurelius ended his days with a simple ritual. Lying in bed each night, he'd exhale deeply and ask himself, have I lived today as if it were my last? Not with morbid fear, but with clarifying focus. That question wasn't meant to paralyze, it was designed to distill. Strip away the trivial, and what's left? The Stoic last thought exercise isn't about tallying achievements or regretting missteps. It's about measuring your days against the only yardstick that never lies. Who did I become when no one was watching? Picture two tombstones side by side. The first reads, "Here lies someone who crushed their quarterly targets, amassed followers, and stayed relentlessly busy." The second, "Here lies someone who listened deeply, chose kindness when it cost them, and left people better than they found them." Which epitaph would you rather claim? The chasm between these legacies isn't determined by talent or luck, it's carved daily through microscopic choices. The extra minutes spent truly hearing a child's story instead of nodding absently while scrolling. The decision to walk away from gossip rather than fuel it. The quiet integrity of doing what's right when shortcuts beckon. modern life conspires against this clarity. We chase promotions like their salvation, fret over social media likes as if they're love, and cram schedules full of activity, mistaking it for meaning. Seneca saw this coming 2,000 years ago. You're afraid of dying, tell me, is the life you're leading worth clinging to? That's the gut punch question the last thought exercise delivers. Not did I win, but did I serve? Not how much did I accumulate, but how deeply did I connect? Consider the contrasting legacies of two historical figures. Howard Hughes died surrounded by wealth yet isolated by paranoia, his fortune meaningless in empty rooms. Meanwhile, Fred Rogers, the unassuming host of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, left behind no viral moments or luxury estates, but a generation who learned empathy through his gentle consistency. His epitaph, deep and simple, is far more essential than shallow and complex. The Stoics would nod legacy isn't about volume, it's about resonance. Now bring this into your nightly routine. Before sleep, play this mental film reel. If today were my final day, would I be proud of how I showed up, not in grand gestures, but in raw moments? That tense meeting, did I respond with patience or pettiness? The stranger who needed help, did I see them or sidestep them? The creative idea I've postponed, did I honor it or ignore it? This isn't self-judgment, it's course correction. Like a sailor checking stars to realign their route, the last thought exercise keeps you oriented toward true north when life's currents pull you off course. The beautiful paradox: those who live with conscious awareness of their ending often create beginnings that outlast them. A teacher's encouragement echoes in students' minds decades later. A grandparent's wisdom becomes family lore. Even small acts, returning a lost wallet, defending someone's dignity, ripple farther than we'll ever know. Your epitaph isn't written in marble, it's etched in the memories of those you've touched. So tonight, as you turn out the light, ask the question that strips everything back to what matters. If this were my final night, would the person I've been today be the legacy I'd choose to leave? The answer might just reshape how you wake tomorrow. Dawn breaks, and the Stoic doesn't reach for their phone, they reach for themselves. Epictetus set the standard 2,000 years ago. First thing in the morning, tell yourself, today I shall meet with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness, all of them due to the offender's ignorance of what is good or evil. Not as a cynical forecast, but as mental armor. This is how the Stoic morning begins, not with avoidance of life's harshness, but with clear-eyed preparation to meet it. Imagine it as a blacksmith heating steel before shaping it. The day's challenges aren't threats, they're the raw material for your resilience. Now let's forge this into action. Your ideal Stoic morning isn't about rigid productivity hacks or draining self-denial. It's a layered ritual that synthesizes all 33 practices into a seamless flow. Start with a view from above before your feet touch the floor. Lie still for 30 seconds and visualize the earth from space, your worries shrinking to pinpricks, your role in the vastness clarified. Then, as you rise, invoke Amor Fati by greeting the day's potential disruptions with, "This is what I need to grow." That neighbor's barking dog, a chance to practice patience. The delayed coffee machine, an exercise in adaptability. Move to your journal, but not for vague gratitude lists. This is the discipline of perception in motion. Write one obstacle you anticipate today, then reframe it as fuel. This meeting isn't an interrogation. It's a chance to articulate my ideas with precision. Follow it with negative visualization, sipping your tea while imagining losing the very cup in your hands, sharpening your appreciation for its warmth. By now, you've woven 5 practices into 10 minutes without effort. The physical ritual matters too. A cold shower isn't masochism. It's voluntary discomfort, training your mind to embrace discomfort before it's forced on you. As the water hits, recite Epictetus. It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. Then, during breakfast, practice objective judgment, observing your hunger without attaching drama. This oatmeal is bland becomes this oatmeal nourishes me. Here's the ultimate synthesis. As you leave your home, perform the Stoic handshake with the day. Literally extend your hand, palm up, and whisper, fate permitting, a reminder that while you'll strive for your goals, you're ready to collaborate with reality's twists. This single gesture bundles the reserve clause, ownership mentality, and dichotomy of control into one tangible act. Your challenge: don't overhaul your entire routine tomorrow. Pick one layer, the journal reframe, the cold shower, or the handshake, and execute it with full presence. Notice how it alters your relationship with the day's first hurdles. Because the Stoic morning isn't about checking boxes. It's about conditioning your mind to meet chaos not as a victim, but as a sculptor meets marble, seeing the raw block not as an obstacle, but as the very material for your masterpiece. Think of these 34 Stoic practices as a mental Swiss Army knife, each tool honed for a specific challenge, but all designed for one purpose: to carve out unshakable influence from the raw material of daily life. Not the hollow influence of titles or loud opinions, but the quiet authority that comes when you've mastered your own mind. From the discipline of perception that reframes obstacles as fuel, to the ownership mentality that turns blame into agency, to the last thought exercise that sharpens your legacy, this is the toolkit that shaped emperors, entrepreneurs, and everyday heroes for millennia. And here's the secret they all discovered. True power isn't about bending the world to your will. It's about bending your reactions to the world's unpredictability with such precision that people can't help but lean in when you speak. Take a moment to scroll back through your life's recent challenges. That argument where you lost your cool, the opportunity you missed because fear whispered, "Not yet." The days you spent chasing validation instead of purpose. Now imagine facing each with even one of these practices in your pocket. What if you'd met criticism with objective judgment, separating facts from feelings, or approached that risky career move with Amor Fati, embracing whatever outcome as necessary grist for your growth? The difference isn't hypothetical. History's most influential figures weren't exempt from storms, they just built better ships. So let's end where we began, with Marcus Aurelius's razor-sharp truth. You have power over your mind, not outside events. This isn't philosophy to admire from a distance, it's a call to action. Your challenge: don't try to swallow all 34 practices at once. Pick one that resonates most, maybe the Stoic pause before reacting in anger, or negative visualization to deepen gratitude, and wear it in for a week like a new pair of boots. Test it in small fires before the inferno hits, then watch what happens, because influence doesn't start when you convince others. It starts when you stop being at war with yourself. If this deep dive into Stoic power resonated, hit subscribe. We're just scratching the surface. Next up, we'll explore how to apply these tools in relationships, leadership, and even parenting. Until then, remember, the world will keep spinning unpredictably, but your mind, that's your sovereign territory. Guard it